we stand here in the last blossoming weeks of a beautiful spring, we've come out of the first taste of green at Passover, through the Omer, blooming into Shavuot and life, togetherness, our month of pride. As a writer, a trans Jew, I found myself consistently drawn to the concept of Mitzrayim, the Hebrew name for the biblical Egypt of bondage, which means the narrow place. I think of all the narrow places we as Jews, as queer, as trans people have had to walk through. We talk of pride, we talk of history. Imagine the difference a month makes and how different it was here in New York on June 1st, 1969, and then July 1st, 1969, and I'm sure some of you were here. Our people stood and said, "No more." Our queer and trans kin came from the Mitzrayim of mafia-owned bars where they could only be queer behind closed doors, into a world where queer people were seen. Trans people, queer people, Jewish people, so many marginalized people are still in diaspora, searching for home. Much of this past week, I've talked with one of my partners, Micah, about the unique relationship Jews have with the earth, that since our ancestors were banished from the Holy Land, we make any land on which we stand holy, and how that's also our experience as queer people. This city is a holy place, and we as queer people have manifested holiness, abundance from our bodies, from our hearts, forever. When the world has said no, we've said yes. We've made homes for all our kindred, everywhere we possibly can. Just this week, a proposal is underway for a plaque at Star House on East 2nd and C, the place where Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson organized and gave shelter to trans women, sex workers, right after Stonewall. Who are we to say that ground is not holy? This Wednesday marked 9 years since I came out publicly. I'd had my revelation a couple of years prior while staying in my late aunt's apartment on 13th and 4th Avenue. A beam of sunlight hit my eyes, and I suddenly saw myself as I am now. I dropped to my knees, sobbing to God, "I understand." I knew in that moment that I had to transition, that I had to come out, that I must help other trans women to do the same. Later, I wondered what my name should be, and on some whisper floating through the kitchen, I heard the name Adrian, which is now my middle name. Those were just two of the mystical moments I felt in my self-discovery. I later found out that my aunt's apartment was a safe house for trans sex workers in the mid-70s. I believe that building, which is over a plumber's on East 13th Street, is holy. I believe in fate and our ancestors can guide us. The generation lost before my own to a plague still speaks to us if we listen. Perhaps you, too, have heard a voice calling to you, calling you a name, familiar in a whisper that feels like coming home. In our Parsha this week, our reading, Naso, the Israelites are in the desert, setting up the tabernacle in their camp, consecrating holy ground in diaspora. It's mainly a list of laws for the priestly people, the Levites, and it holds a great irony. In its first part, the people are told to banish those who touch the dead from the tabernacle and people with disease, and they infer sexual diseases, sexually transmitted infections. Yet one chapter later, it talks of holiness, how we get closer to God in this description of the Nazirite, the Levites, who may not cut their hair or imbibe wine, who monastically give themselves to God, and which contains the threefold blessing, which we always say on Friday night as the blessing for the children. I was poking around on Chabad.org while I was preparing this. And I found an essay about the Nazirites, riffing on the story of Samuel. As some of you may know, Samuel's mother, Hannah, had great difficulty bearing a child, or conceiving of a child. I'm sure she thought about it a lot, but she couldn't, She prayed to God, promising that she would give Samuel to God as a Nazirite if she would just be blessed with a son. And this author asked if Hannah's deal with God was fair, and concluded that Hannah did not have the right to control Samuel's destiny, but that she did have a responsibility to raise her child to raise her child with values that she wished to pass on to him. Unfortunately, as many of us in this room, and whatever room you're in, may know, a parent raising a child in a rigid version of holiness and faith, as this article endorsed, leads to queer and trans children not being accepted, diminished, forced to conform, whether through bodily expression, emotions, or desire and attraction. At best, we stay quiet enough until we can leave safely. At worst, we're abused or pushed out of what should be loving homes into the narrow place, into Mitzrayim. I had a dream this morning of how my life might have been had I been raised with an open acceptance of queerness. I dreamed of being in my family home as a teen, being with someone who loved me, loved my body so much like theirs. And we were together in such a pure and simple way. And then later in the dream, we were having breakfast with my family, and my mishpucha laughed at us because we accidentally got too loud that night. But they laughed in a way that was very obviously affirming of that relationship. How much trauma could be avoided if we brought our children to view their queerness as holiness? If we demonstrated holiness and compassion without judgment? As Jews, as queer people, as trans people, we're all survivors. In another time and in our time, they tried and are trying to eliminate us. As survivors, we have a great responsibility to practice As survivors, we have a great responsibility to practice tikkun olam, the act of repairing the world in our lifetimes. We are commanded to do so. To quote my partner, Swan Royale, who's right there, hello, darling, and who's sitting in a row with her partner, her partner's partner, and our dear friends from New Hampshire. Trans people are easy to love. Trans children are easy to love. On this first Shabbat of Pride, I ask you this. Wherever you see injustice, be it in those pushing against the rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination, or people who are frightened to death to walk down the street in Texas and Florida and Tennessee and even here in New York, I beg you, stand. Make sure we all come out of Mitzrayim, that the peace and liberation we wish for at every Passover or Seder becomes true and manifest. Not next year, right now. When we accept ourselves, we are liberated. When we demonstrate that liberation for other people, they see the path to their own. Our homes and our hearts must be open, not just to those escaping injustice in other places, but for our children and for ourselves. When God shines her countenance on you, it's because you are a mirror that reflects back holiness in every ounce of your being. Being trans is holy. Being proud is holy. Being in community is holy, and the whole world is filled with our glory. We reflect God. On my 9-year anniversary, on Wednesday, a dear friend of mine happened to be at my home when she took hormone replacement therapy for the first time. I told her to screenshot her phone to remember this moment and this time, and when she did, I realized that we share an anniversary, which I told her. Swan and I hugged her, said Shechechianu, and felt the strong power of our trans sisterhood well up within us. And tonight, that girl is coming out to her parents. Please take a moment with me to pray for her and for all of those struggling to shatter their closet walls to find holiness. When we are out, wherever we stand, Wherever we create chosen family, we find holiness. Whether it's the Star House, the LGBT Center, CBST, the Christopher Street Pier, the Eagle, looking at other queer people and seeing yourself in them, or your own reflection mirrored in the eyes of a lover. We are the holy place. We are our own promised land. And to go there, through the narrow, we must make a choice, not of being trans or queer, that's innate. The choice is to live, to affirm your truth. I chose life because I finally had a safe place to do so and a world waiting for me after 25 years of not. There have been hard times and hurt since, but mostly a light that finds me whenever I'm in those hard moments. I can't quite describe it, but it keeps me going. Maybe it's God. Maybe it's the ancestors speaking, but perhaps, the word is love. Thank you. I'm going to the other side of the stage. I wrote a song about that concept. Oh, yeah. All right, how are we doing this? Is this working? Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Harold.
Swan, do you want to sing this with me? Please give it up for Swan Rael. Told that freedom comes from going through the narrowest place. Found each other on the way there. Felt like a kind of mutual grace. Something's pulling us in opposite directions. We can't predict anything for sure. We'll find a way to any share tomorrow. Somewhere I think we should go. We've come together this far. On the same road. If we stray too much apart, oh, meet me where the lavender grows. There's a stone wall facing sunset in a field underneath an oak tree. If we get lost or distant, I'll wait there till you find me. It won't be hard to get there. It's as east as you can go. On the island where I was born, just north of the South Shore. We've come together this far. Different paces on the same road. Too much apart. Meet me where the lavender grows. Could be days, could be months, could be weeks. Just wait for winter to fade. I'll come around in the early afternoons. Blossoms bloom in May. I'll be there every day. No one really goes it alone, no matter how alone we think we are. You and me, we're like everyone else. We're all trying to make it this start. We've gone through some of the hardest times. It can make any distance seem true. One day we might have the chance to stop running. I'll be there waiting for you. We've come together this far. much apart. Meet me where the lavender grows. 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 Thank you.